about staying alive.
Won't you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion, it's gotta go. Yeah.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Atheist Experience. I am your host, Russell Glasser, and with me today is my good friend, Don Baker.
Hey, good to be here.
Today is Sunday, July 10th. We're a live call-in public access atheist television show based in Austin, Texas, dedicated to promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We're also available through live streaming video at ustream.tv. The official Atheist Experience website is www.atheist-community-experience.com. That other site doesn't exist. No, it does, but long story. You can provide feedback by commenting on the official show blog at freethoughtblogs.com/AXP, or you can email us at, for the moment, tv@atheist-community.org. And if you enjoyed this show, you can check out our other related podcasts, The Non-Prophets and Godless Bitches, which you'll find links to on the Atheist Experience website. If you enjoy the show today, oh, can I still say this or not? I'm going to keep saying it until somebody tells me not to, but we'll be at dinner, and if you feel like it, you can come at around 6 at El Arroyo, 1624 West 5th Street in Austin. And that does it for those announcements. What's up today, Don?
Yeah, we have new rules, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I've been living with this is like the third month that I've been aware of them, but I'm still not completely aware of what I can get away with.
Okay, all right. Well, today I have a presentation. I try to do that, and I've been doing a long series on the theme of the failures of Christianity, and got another set today. In the past, I've talked about the failure of the Christian-based abortion policy, the failure of Christian genocide of the Jews. No matter how you look at that, that's a failure. The failure of the Catholic pedophilia scandal, the failure of prayer, the failure of the Second Coming, the failure of social engineering. And today, I'm going to talk about the failure of biblical morality. And hopefully, all this fail, we should maybe question: is there omnipotent God behind all this? Why is there so many failures? So biblical morality, what is that? Well, this is the laws and orders and behaviors attributed to God as depicted in the Bible. And supposedly, a lot of folks think that God's the author of this absolute morality that we should all be following. And God is claimed to be perfect and timeless and all this good stuff. So Matt has a take on this. He's done a lecture on this sort of thing, mostly focusing on the goodness of secular morality. I'm going to focus on the failure of biblical morality today. Today I'm going to talk about what I think are the 6 biggest ones. I'm going to take three from the Old Testament, 3 from the New Testament, and why are there 6? Why are there any? There's a lot more than 6. Let's put it that way. But I'm going to just hit the 6 ones. So on the Old Testament, I'm going to talk about original sin as a moral failure, might makes right, the behavior of God as a moral failure, and selling out your fellow man for God. So what is original sin? Let's start with that one. Well, the fall of man is depicted in Genesis 3. Adam and Eve are penalized for eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And there's all sorts of penalties that are given to Adam and Eve for having done this when they were told not to. In the Judaic interpretation, I think that this is effectively a just so story. It's trying to explain various things in a way that is a fanciful way of explaining it, why we wear clothes, why we're afraid of snakes, these
Hey,
sorts
ladies,
of things.
you know how it hurts to have children?
Yeah.
Here's why.
Yeah, that's one of the downsides. It also tries to explain why man has to endure a lot of hardships throughout his life as he screwed up. So, but in Christianity, the fall becomes this notion of original sin, and especially depicted by Paul in Romans 5:12 through 21. I'm not going to read it. But you are inherently sinful and evil and vile and dirty, and for having descended from Adam and Eve. You're born that way. And belief in Jesus as your Savior is the only cure for this. And so effectively Jesus' existence is to cure original sin. That's his whole reason for existing. So what are some of the problems with this? Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's an obvious con game. If you can convince somebody that you owe a debt, you can control them, right? Because they have to pay this debt back, right? And you can kind of control their behavior. And you know, a lot of folks say, well, religion breaks your leg and sells you a crutch. And this is the perfect example of that, right? You're an evil, wretched thing, and the only way to get fixed, the only way to cure this problem is to be part of a church or believe in Jesus or whatever, right? And it's also used to perpetuate harm. So I think it's a mind game to convince people they're depraved and that they're worthy of torture and damnation. And for centuries, as you say, the pain of childbirth was justified and not mitigated, as well as the subservience of women, because in Genesis 3:16 it says, "I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." So this was God to Eve. Go ahead.
I've noticed on a number of occasions that a lot of sermons focus on making life sound as horrible as possible in general. Like, you know, they'll go through things that could potentially make you happy. You know, what, are you going to be happy with your career? Well, you know, eventually nobody's going to care about what you do. Your relationships, everybody's going to be unfaithful to you. And just sort of create...
it's a marketing technique, right?
Yeah, I mean, create apparent misery where they say that the only thing that can ever make you happy is the church, and that's kind of a similar approach with the original sin thing you're talking about.
I think so.
Right?
Yeah, there's an approach of spinning suffering, right? It will give meaning to your suffering. You have suffering, but we'll spin it, right?
Right. But first, we have to make sure you really understand how much you're suffering.
Right. God is testing you, and this is the path. Right. So the other problem in original sin is there's this notion of it's used to promote ignorance. So this idea that knowledge is bad, and boy, if you try to go for that knowledge stuff, you're going against God. And trust your faith and emotions instead. So the antidote is, the atheist take on this is a silly fictional story and an obvious frame job on Eve. And so it's just nonsense. And science tells us that the story's a fable because there was no Adam and Eve. There was no original pair of people, and Christians don't like that a whole lot because the whole idea of Jesus making a sacrifice as part of the crucifixion to erase this sin thing of Adam and Eve is all just nonsense. And there's really no reason for Jesus to have ever suffered, if he ever existed at all, and the whole crucifixion becomes a gory performance art piece with no real purpose at that point. And so Christians don't like the theory of evolution too much for that reason. The original sin is kind of mind games. It's harmful. It attempts at of controlling people and not moral. And reason and knowledge are necessary for morality, and so you got to have those things, and you can't just embrace ignorance. So original sin is a failure for on the moral front. Let's go on to the next one. Might makes right. Well, here's the idea that, well, God is so powerful. He's the big guy. He gets to make all the decisions, and whatever he does is just fine. So Yahweh, the main God of the Old Testament, is really a storm god, which explains a lot of his behavior. And he does a lot of storming throughout the Old Testament. Richard Dawkins has this great quote, "The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all of fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, forgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, and capriciously malevolent bully." That's a mouthful. You can say that a lot better than I can.
I believe that's the favorite pull quote of conservatives in the entire book.
Is it?
Prove what a bastard Richard Dawkins is.
Well, it's true, I think. So that was from the God Delusion. And a perfect example of this is the Great Flood in Genesis 6 through 9. So all of humanity was deemed wicked, and there was this global genocide. And boy, isn't that wonderful? Isn't that moral?
I believe a picture has been going around Facebook lately that says something like, God kills every pregnant woman and child on planet Earth, hates abortion.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have to it begs the question of what about this abortion thing? Because there had to have been all sorts of pregnant women at that point. They were all killed, all drowned. Of course, the story is fiction, right? It's just nonsense. But I think a lot of the Old Testament is to try to convince you how horrible this God is, so you pay attention to him and follow him, and it's kind of a veiled threats and maybe not so veiled threats. So the problem, of course, is God is a tyrant and exalted as such. He's the big guy. And there's a kind of a do as I say, not as I do double standard in the Bible with regard to his morality. He tells you to do these things, but he does them himself. And his whims become the standard of morality. And this harkens to the Euthyphro dilemma, which we can talk about if you want. But and as far as his followers are concerned, thuggery is godly, and so you should emulate God and be a thug. Maybe, I don't know. It might explain a lot of behavior we're seeing.
The Inquisition.
Sure. Yeah, and it seems like whenever religion gets into power, or we have a mixture of church and state, that bad things happen, right? Because the state ends up being used in evil ways for the benefit of the church, these sorts of things. So the antidote for might makes right. Well, secular moralities, as they are generally based on the notion of equality. So Kant's categorical imperative is an example of that. And we have the rule of law, which means that everybody needs to follow the same laws. And this goes all the way back to the Magna Carta and even earlier, 1215. In contrast to the idea of a divine right, or kings have more power, or Jesus has more power, or whatever.
Right. I would say that a lot of our laws today are sort of experimental. I mean, some of them may have started out rooted in absolute divine authority commands, but then over time people start realizing, this here doesn't work so well. We're going to need to tweak it because it's produced some real disasters in the last society that tried it that way. Yeah,
our laws and our morality are sort of organic. A big part of it's organic in the sense that we're trying them out. We're learning from them. We figure out, hey, the slavery thing maybe wasn't a good idea. The Bible thinks it's just fine, but maybe we decide that's not such a good idea, and so we stop it. So we change.
Or in the case of the Magna Carta, having a king who's not accountable to anyone. Maybe they didn't think at the time, what happens if the king is Prince Joffrey from Game of Thrones and just a scumbag?
Okay.
But then some real examples of that pop up in history, and some of the lower level members of society, I mean lords with Magna Carta, but still say, hey, this king has to have some kind of check and balance on him, or else we might have some really horrible stuff.
Yeah. So that's where we are today, is we're trying to make progress there. Well, and even in modern fiction, we have some better antidotes to might makes right. If we had an alien species that has more power than us, maybe they're not considered worthy of worship, right? And we've learned this from science fiction. We've learned this from, Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So how could we tell a god from somebody that just came down from outer space? Or even comic books have better moralities. With great power there must also come great responsibility. That's a quote from Batman and from Stan Lee.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man? Spider-Man.
Yes.
You're right. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. So you know this stuff. Yeah, good.
Sadly, yes.
So the ironic thing is, you can get better morality from comic books than the Bible in this case. Okay, how about another one? Selling out your fellow man for God. So this is the idea. Okay, you got this God guy, and you want to make a trade with him because he's got goodies you want. right? He's going to make you wealthier. He's going to benefit you in some way, maybe like a trip to heaven or something like that. Well, what are you going to trade with this God? What are you going to trade with a God that has everything? Well, the thing you trade, of course, is the rights of your fellow man, right? You gladly screw somebody over and make God happier. So this is epitomized, I think, in the story of Abraham and Isaac in Genesis 22, where God says, "Oh, well, make me a burnt offering of your kid." Later he says, "Ah, just kidding." But the point of the story was not necessarily the killing, but the fact that Abraham was willing to go through with it. And God says, "Well, for now I know that thou fearest me. You know, you're one of my things, one of my buddies." And I think this is kind of like a gang initiation ritual. And in result, Abraham gets a bunch of blessings and some land and these sorts of things. And so
I think going back to the Magna Carta example, I mean, you know, I earlier said that the amendment had to be made to deal with what happens if the king is a scumbag. But part of the problem is that where religion is concerned, it's not even possible to under the religious paradigm, you're not even allowed to evaluate whether the God might be a scumbag.
Yeah.
Because anything that God does, including make you scared of him by ordering you to kill your kid and making sure that you're willing to do it, is treated as good by definition. Whereas any king who came up with those kind of rules would be rightly judged by history as a terrible tyrant.
Absolutely. So your whole moral judgment gets sabotaged by this God thing, right? I didn't even include that in that, but that's a very good point. So is selling out your fellow man for God a good thing? Well, no. It's harmful, and it's even worse if there is no God, because there's really no benefit to anybody. But the transaction benefits the believer because they think you're getting something. And if there's a God, maybe it benefits the God. Maybe he values somebody flying a plane into a building and destroying it. But what about the victims? They kind of get screwed over in this whole thing, and so it's clearly not moral in that respect. So this is the same thinking as death to the infidels. Throughout history, witch burnings, killing the Jews for Jesus, making women bear children that they know they can't support, screwing over gays. All this stuff is all kind of the same idea of how do we make God happy by screwing somebody else. And the antidote, of course, is responsibility. The concept of responsibility is absent from the Bible as far as I can tell. There's an idea of God, making God happy and following his orders and getting punished if you don't follow him, but there's the idea of personal responsibility is kind of absent, and that's, in my opinion, a cornerstone of morality. So the victim has rights too, and those perpetuating religious harm need to pay retribution. I think that we should be taxing churches for the harm that religions do. And religious freedom in the U.S. currently means that religious believers are free to screw over the non-believers. So this is kind of still in work in progress. We're still working on this. If the whole idea of responsibility gets mentioned, then they cry religious persecution. Oh, you're persecuting me because I don't get to screw over somebody. Okay, so that was the Old Testament, those three. Let's talk about the New Testament. Infinite punishment and reward, substitutive sacrifice, and the second coming, or the rapture. So the idea of infinite punishment, infinite reward, this is heaven and hell. It's a New Testament idea, probably swiped from the Egyptian religions or Greek religions, and Jesus is strongly associated with Christianity. There's an eternal reward or punishment. In heaven, you have eternal bliss, or maybe sex with virgins or something, I don't know, communing with other good people that you know, your family, these sorts of things. In hell, there's eternal torment, burning in a lake of fire, absence of identity, these sorts of things. So the idea is simply not just. A lot of folks have realized this. You have an infinite punishment for any sort of finite crime that you might be committing on this earth. And not only that, the crimes are sins. So what is a sin? It's just a slight against God. Well, if God is an omnipotent being, how can you possibly harm him? How can you possibly give him a slight? I haven't quite figured that out. But and this infinite reward and punishment gives you even more reason to sell out your fellow man for God. So if you're going to get 72 regenerating virgins in the afterlife for being a martyr for your religion or whatever, why not? You get such a huge reward for such a small penalty of killing yourself. And of course, Muslims and Christians worship the same God, so I think the same sort of logic applies there. And the infinities associated with this moral calculation that you're doing for this infinite reward and infinite punishment skews the whole moral calculation. So even a small sin carries a huge risk, huge potential risk of whatever. So your human morality, where you're considering the cost and benefits of other people, completely get washed out in this. And so this whole thing is immoral from a human standpoint.
Right, and I mean, don't forget to tie that back into original sin, because there really, in Christianity, there's no, or at least in some forms of Christianity, there's no distinction between a guy like Hitler and a guy who kills somebody in self-defense and a guy who never really does anything bad, I mean, by human standards, because we're all descended from Adam, and I think many Christians would say that regardless of what you do in life, that taint is enough to condemn you to hell forever. So it skews it even more than
I'm letting on.
Maybe
right.
implying.
Sure. Yeah, it's just loaded with problems. So our laws kind of lack these problems, right? In the sense that we have generally finite penalties for finite crimes. A little more justice there. We do have this notion of a death penalty, which might be viewed as an infinite punishment and that you're going to end somebody's life. But this is still controversial, and this is still being worked out and still being debated. Whereas there's no debate on the religious side.
There's those evolving human laws again,
yes,
in response to practical considerations.
Right. On the death penalty, there's a lot of folks who are very concerned about, well, what if it's meted out incorrectly, right? What if the person actually didn't commit those crimes, right? And if you have human error there, then maybe you're better off not. Anyway, that's a tangent. There's also no evidence of heaven or hell, so this is just really a mind game as far as I'm concerned. It makes churches wealthy and the gullible poorer. The next thing is substitutive sacrifice. So say you commit a crime like stealing something. Jesus' alleged sacrifice on the cross supposedly fixes it. You are forgiven and Jesus died for your sins. End of story. So the problem here is that the moral transaction that should be occurring is sabotage. The perpetrator of the crime never really gets punished. They get to atone to God or whatever. The victim is never vindicated. They get more or less robbed in the process. But the church makes out really well, right? They get to effectively steal from the victim. And the perpetrator atones to the church and has to pay a penance or money, or becomes a little bit more subservient to the church as part of his atonement. So this is pretty much a scam where you rob the victims. So according to Christianity, Hitler, a believer, is in heaven while having redeemed through communion and belief, whereas Gandhi, a non-believer, is in hell because he didn't submit to Jesus or whatever, right? And also, the substitutive sacrifice becomes kind of a very cynical thing. Jesus becomes kind of a free pass to kill Jews. So in Matthew 27:35, let his blood be on us and our children, according to been an excuse to kill Jews throughout the centuries. But Jesus is also an absolution from any sin. So what's the problem? Martin Luther says, be a sinner and sin strongly, but more strongly have faith and rejoice in Christ. So you get to kill for free if you're a Christian believer, I guess. Okay, so go ahead.
My favorite example of that is the Jack Chick tract. I think it's called The Gunslinger, which lays it out really starkly, where there's Bad Bart who goes around holding up banks and shooting people, and then there's the law-abiding sheriff, and it shows in the end Bad Bart accepts Christ, so he goes to heaven, and the sheriff, his horse gets spooked by a snake, falls down, dies, and he goes to hell because he never accepted Jesus. And I mean, it's a very direct message that nothing you do in life, as far as thinking of it as good or bad, actually matters as much as that one binary decision to be part of the tribe.
Yes, yes. And to be subservient as part of that binding, right? Right. So yeah, this whole substituted sacrifice thing is no secular law works like this sort of shell game thing. The perpetrator is the one who's punished in secular laws, and the victim forgives maybe if there is true atonement. But that's their choice and not the church's choice. And nobody else can atone for your crimes. You know, Russell can't go to jail on my behalf for my having stolen something. It's just silly. So this whole idea is crazy. One more here, the second coming. The idea that the second coming is the triumphant return of Jesus Christ to earth. He'll get to raise the dead, judge the living and the dead, and set up the kingdom of God on the earth. Okay, sounds wonderful. Matthew 13:41-43. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather in the kingdom all things that offend, and to them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire, and there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth, and there shall be righteous, and the righteous shall shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. So isn't that wonderful? So this whole second coming idea is a patently misanthropic idea. The non-believers will be tortured, killed, and tortured again in the afterlife. Lots of torture here. The believers get to watch in gleeful, self-righteous, sadistic hedonism, watching all this gnashing of teeth and burning in the fires of hell. And I think this is not much different than snuff porn. I like to use that analogy. Which is a big business in churches and books and other media. So I've talked about this before in the failure of the second coming. The other problem with it is the idea of the second coming is a source of some real world tension in the Middle East. There's the notion of Christian Zionism, where the Christians are going to go and make the end times happen, and the Jews will all be killed by Christ because they didn't believe, all except for a few of them. Anyway, a bunch of crazy eschatological, no. crazy stuff,
right? Does it?
Okay. And this whole idea of the second coming is the basis for much of this screw the environment attitude embraced by Christianity, because if Jesus is going to come back, why bother fixing it? So I consider the second coming to be the antithesis of morality. It's screw the non-believers, screw that might be in the way of the end times prophecy, screw the future generations, including your own descendants. And if people are so anxious to meet their Messiah, why don't they just go do that off themselves and go meet their Messiah? So I actually have a bumper sticker, not on my car, not in a while since I changed cars, but it says, "Rapture is a world without religious nuts." Okay. So the Bible-based morality is exactly what you'd expect from a bunch of Bronze Age goat herders. Many changes in religious interpretations have made it worse. The second coming idea has been respun in recent years. By contrast, secular morality has improved greatly over the centuries. It's an evolving thing. It's getting better as time goes on. Yet the religious cling to the Bible-based morality, thinking it's sublime or inscrutable. You cannot understand the ways of God. Well, what a bunch of bullshit. You know, you can make these moral distinctions yourself and say that killing is bad or mindless subservience is bad, these sorts of things. So we've outgrown this biblical morality, and we should discard it. Let it go. Okay, sorry.
I think we have a caller who disagrees with you.
Good. That's what
Mike's
we like.
actually been waiting so patiently, calling in from Grand Junction, Colorado, after helping us heroically test the phones at the beginning. Have we kept you on this long, Mike? You still there?
Yeah, I've been listening, yeah.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, doing very well. My question is about objective morality, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I understand, you know, there's some atheists who just kind of bite the bullet and say that there is no objective morality. So what is the position of you two on that?
My position is, you know, we are moral partly because of our evolutionary past. You know, we have big brains. We can empathize with others. We can empathize with the suffering of others. We can put ourselves mentally in the minds and the bodies of other people. So we have a notion of compassion. We have our big brains can be used to reason about the consequences of events. And our big brain helps us remember the actions of various people. So there's this notion of responsibility, or this notion of, oh, this guy screwed me in the past. Maybe I should be aware of him. And you sort of have a public image and these sorts of things. So these, I think these are kind of the cornerstones: reason, responsibility, and compassion of a secular morality, and they harken back to our evolutionary past. And as we learn more, and we talked about this earlier, as we learn more as a species, as we try out various rules and laws, we learn whether they work or not, and we try to improve them.
Yeah, my point of view is that the values that people hold can actually be somewhat subjective. For instance, you know, if you had a bunch of people who were actually actively suicidal and just wanted to die more than anything else, then you couldn't really apply the principle of don't kill them as being beneficial to them. But because we're humans and we tend to and we have this generally shared experience, once we can agree, once we can come to more or less a consensus about what we all value, then the question of what's the most effective way to achieve those values can be a very objective thing, because you can observe what actually works and what doesn't.
Okay, I should have been more clear up front. I mean, I was just asking a clarification question before I really get to my question. So many atheists will just say, hey, under atheism, there are no objective moral standards. So do you think that there are or are not objective morals? Like, which side of that are you on?
If there are objective moral standards, they're part of our sort of normal wiring in our brains, right? We have, you know, you can actually do studies where you look at the brains of people in like an fMRI machine and give them moral problems, and you can see various parts of the brain light up and deal with various moral dilemmas and these sorts of things. And so in that sense, it's objective in the sense that it's part of our wiring, but it's not objective in the sense of, oh, there's some God from on high dictating these things. So, you know,
yeah, I mean, clearly I'm not asking you as an atheist, do you believe that God gives us objective morals? I mean, do you believe, some atheists do, some atheists don't. Do you believe that there does exist objective morals?
I think it's not a yes or no question, Mike. You've just got about as nuanced an answer as we're about to give. Let me ask you a question. Do you think there's an objective morality?
No. You can't just flip on me without asking the question. You didn't answer the question.
No, we did answer the question in a lot of detail. It's not a yes or no question, Mike.
So nearly every society has prohibitions against killing, for example. And you know, you can reason about that as, hey, I don't want to get killed. I'd prefer to live in a society where killing is kind of a downplay. It doesn't happen very much. And you know, is this a universal? I'm not so sure. Maybe it is, but is it objective? Probably not. Yeah, but it's something that is a genuinely good idea, I think. And so that's sort of where we are. Is we're using those sorts of things to, you know, we're looking out for those sorts of things and hopefully applying them throughout.
Yeah, an example that can be used to kind of see if people believe in objective morals or not would be, it's kind of a two-step one. You take an extreme example, you would say, you know, torturing babies for fun. You know, you say, is it always wrong, morally wrong, to torture babies for fun? And you could say, even if, you know, for the objective part of it, you know, even if there was a group of people who believed that it was okay to torture babies for fun, if they took over the world and killed everybody who disagreed with them, so now the world is inhabited only by people who think it's okay to torture babies for fun.
Wait, so the world is full of people who only believe that torturing babies is a good idea? Does that include the babies who are being tortured?
No, I mean, they're like infants. They don't really have an opinion on the matter.
So, I mean, you've kind of undermined your own premise here.
How so?
I mean, you've stated that you've got this situation where everybody agrees on objective morality, but on this particular
it's okay to torture babies for fun. So that would be, do you think that would be wrong, or would it still be wrong, or would it then be made okay because everybody agrees?
But everybody doesn't agree. You just said that.
No, everybody agrees.
Except the babies.
What?
One way you can measure this is whether there's harm done, and whether there's suffering, or as
Sam
Harris brings up this idea of well-being, right? Promoting well-being, and then you can make moral decisions based on does a particular thing promote well-being, or does it hinder it? And this one clearly hinders the well-being of the children, right? So maybe it's not such a good thing.
Yeah, but that's not objective. I mean, just to say.
Okay, but you think there is an objective source for killing babies is always wrong, right?
No, that's an example that I would ask of you to get your answer
Wait,
on
you
that.
don't
What?
think that it's always wrong to torture babies?
Look, I used that to ask you what your position is, which you still haven't really given me.
What is your position? Do you or don't you?
Yes, my position is that it is objectively wrong to torture babies.
And where does that objective edict come from? In your opinion?
In my opinion, it comes from God.
So if God said that torturing babies was the highest moral good, then would it be?
Yeah, look, you need to call in
So
to
babies?
I called to ask in your opinion.
Do babies that babies that die early in infancy before they can accept Jesus Christ, do they go to heaven, or do they go to hell? And it isn't hell torture? So I'm kind of confused. Your God thinks torturing babies is okay, as far as I can tell.
Okay, maybe this will help us to get to the reason why I called. Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely. Christianity is the worst thing in the world. Absolutely. Okay, now.
I didn't say that.
The reason I called was to ask you, which you still haven't answered. Okay, I mean, is it objectively wrong, or if everybody agreed, would that make it okay?
I think morality is about harm, and to the extent that you can measure harm and weigh harm, you can make moral decisions.
Right. If everybody agreed to the point that, like, the babies actually liked being tortured, then yeah, it would be okay.
If the babies wanted to be tortured, it would be okay?
Yeah, because you said everybody agrees that it's okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So everybody would have to include the
doesn't really
babies.
have an opinion on the matter. It's not really able to form those opinions.
Well, I think we can reason about what the suffering might be of such babies, right?
Yeah, it'd be huge suffering. Yeah,
Right. So then it would not be universally agreed on, like you're saying, because there would be a fairly large contingent of people who don't agree.
I don't think you could say they don't agree. Like, does a baby agree? Does a 1 month old baby agree to certain things?
I think
pop
we
up a level.
generally agree
Let's
that
pop up a
babies are
level.
sentient.
You're asking if human nature were dramatically different, would our morality be different? And the answer is yes.
No, that's not what I'm asking. That's not what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
It is
you're
kinda
asking.
what
You're
you're
saying,
asking.
well, if we had only humans that were morally screwed up by today's standards, that's what you're saying, right? That's your hypothetical.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what I'm asking is, like, there's atheists who are just willing to say, look, there's no objective standard. I would prefer that people not do some things. I would like it if they didn't do it to me. The world would
Human
be
morality
nicer.
is an inherently human thing, right?
Say that again?
Human morality is an inherently human thing. If the nature of humanity changes, the nature of human morality changes. As we evolve, as we learn more, as we understand the earth and these sorts of things, our morality is changing. And so it's not an objective thing, but it's maybe it's converging, or maybe it's getting better, or maybe it's,
Okay, I think you just answered my question, maybe accidentally. So it's not objective. So you do not believe in objective morality.
No.
What I believe
Not objective,
is
independent of humanity, right?
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's so you could have just
Outside
answered
of
that.
humanity.
That was the very first thing I asked of you. You
Sorry.
could have just given me an upfront
Sorry.
answer then. Yeah, okay, I can't ask you the real question that I wanted to ask you then, because, I mean, there are some atheists.
ask it
who think
anyway.
that
I'd
they're-
like to know what the follow-up is.
What's that?
Go ahead and ask it anyway. If we had said yes, then what would the
Okay.
follow-up be?
Yeah, I mean, there are some atheists who posit that there does exist objective morality.
Okay.
And so to them, I would have asked, you know, since you're positing the existence of this thing, you know, what evidence do you have that it exists?
Oh, it's a fine question. It's a fine
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd like to get back to the question I asked a few minutes ago because you kind of folded a little quicker than I would have liked. You don't really believe that Christianity is the most horrible thing in the world, and I'm just interested in knowing whether you think that if God said that torturing babies is the best thing ever, then would it become that? Then would it become good to you?
Yeah, I mean, this is number one on the predictability list. I mean, you do this to all your callers.
Well, I mean, you asked us to get a yes or no, so what do you think about this?
What?
Seriously,
We
what do you
answered your
think about
question.
it?
It took a little while. I'm sorry.
I'm not the guy with the question and answer show. You're confused. You call a guy with the question and answer show and grill him about that. I'm not going to sit here and get grilled and make some off the cuff.
Oh, you're not. So you think you just
do.
called to lecture to us, and then you didn't want to have an actual two-way discussion?
He knows he's going to be uncomfortable with his answer. That's what the problem is.
I was very polite to ask the question. He finally gave me an answer after fighting me on it forever.
All right.
And I was very polite. I was not rude. I was not lecturing.
Okay.
Come on.
Well, we appreciate your call. Why don't we maybe move on? Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling. Jordan in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
What's
How
up?
are you?
Well, first I would like to point out that I'm not an atheist. I wouldn't consider myself an atheist because I believe in a spiritual force.
What does that mean?
To me, a spiritual force is basically, I can't really explain it, like an afterlife type.
It's like a soul?
It's just like the truth, like hard to explain. But I'm against organized religion.
Okay.
And my problem
Don't
with
care.
what atheists like to think is that science is the only like way to truth. Like it's the only evidence.
Well, I mean, can you call something truth if you don't know what it is and can't explain it?
That's not. Well, yeah, I misworded it because I'm kind of tired right now. I only slept like 3 hours, so it's,
All right,
like
sorry,
my
let me cut
thinking
you
is
some
kind of off.
slack.
But like, have you ever heard of psychonautics?
Uh,
I haven't.
Nope.
So what is that?
It's
I know a game
basically
called Psychonauts.
the use of psychedelic drugs and meditation
To explore your inner space idea?
altered
Okay.
states of consciousness and basically spirituality.
So
Okay.
you think that using chemical substances to alter your brain
Like the
makes
LSD
you
or something,
makes you perceive the truth better instead of just, let's say, fantasizing pink elephants?
Well,
I mean, do you think that if you take LSD and fantasize pink elephants, those elephants are real?
well, see, that's a common misconception about psychedelics is that you see these things. It's a lot more than that. You don't see things that aren't there unless
Okay.
you're having closed-eye visuals, which is like a dreamlike state.
Okay, but I mean, stuff in dreams, everybody's got experience with dreams, I would think, and we all acknowledge that that stuff isn't always true, or even usually true, right?
Yeah.
So
You know,
why?
I've heard also,
Okay.
you know, just take it on a little different tangent. You know, I've heard of folks that, you know, experiment with these sorts of things, saying that they have these profound experiences and they're growing and learning and these sorts of things. And what's not clear to me is, do you have the feeling that you have a profound experience, or do you really do that? Do you really, you know, are you really learning something? And if so, what has been gained from this? What do we know from this sort of thing that we wouldn't know otherwise?
And how could you tell the difference between an actual profound experience and a fake one, assuming there is a difference?
Right.
Well, from my experience and a lot of other psychedelic explorers, you basically lose your ego and you realize we're all one. You become a lot happier with life, and it's
There's a part of your brain that gives you this sense of of being separate from the rest of the world, and when that gets sabotaged or degraded or drugged or whatever, that experience, you become one with the universe. Give me one with everything, you know, I'm a hot dog sort of thing.
Change must come from within.
But my point is that from the scientific standpoint, what's happening probably is your brain states have changed, and this experience is just the result of, you know, your altered brain state.
Right.
And, and there's nothing necessarily profound there. So I'm asking, you know, give me some meaty to grab onto that has come out of this sort of thing that says this thing is real other than a brain state.
Well, it's psychedelic drugs are like arguably the start of like religion, spirituality, because you can go way back in
Shamanism
time.
and all that.
You're not really selling it well to a couple of atheists.
Well,
yeah, it's old stuff, right? It's been around,
like,
been part of our human experience for a long time. Yes.
yeah, but it's like it's natural. I'm not saying like all natural drugs are healthy, because that's not true with Datura and stuff.
Asbestos is natural.
Cyanide?
Cyanide. That's natural. Okay. But I'm still fishing for something meaty here. You know, you know, if you had the one greatest thing that has come out of this that is the shining example of why this is good stuff or why we've learned something other than through science, what would you tell me?
It's an experience that's like the first time I did a psychedelic drug, it was like an awakening right at the start. Like I was able to think so clearly about the most complex things, and it changed like.
So what did you find out from that? Is there anything you can share with us? I mean, did you come up with a grand unifying theory or solve Fermat's equation? Like what I'm hearing you say is that when you're not on drugs, you think one thing, and when you are on drugs, you think a different thing. But the question is, like, how do you know that the drug version is the right one?
It's not necessarily like while you're on. It's what you get out of it.
Okay.
It helped with I was an alcoholic for a little bit, and it really helped with that.
And now you're doing LSD instead.
So what about,
No,
you know, what about prayer or meditation?
On occasion, and it's completely healthy.
Okay. I mean, I would say that scientists generally disagree with that, but you don't believe in science.
No, I do believe in science.
Okay.
But this is my problem with like these atheists, or like it's not even atheists. It's like everybody with a hard head, like they can't. Like shrooms are grown from the ground. Like it's a part of Earth. It's a part of Earth. It's part of life. Life is so complex. You can't say that there's no meaning for it being there.
You can say it. I mean,
yeah. Well, you know, I believe that you believe that you've had a you know, profound experience from this, and that you've gained internal insight. I guess I'm still unconvinced personally. So
well,
that's kind of.
What about DMT? You know what DMT is?
Nope. Sorry.
Dimethyltryptamine. It's in everybody's body, every human's body.
okay.
It's produced in the pineal gland. It's the most potent psychedelic in the world.
Okay.
And it's said to be released upon death, like before death, and it's what gives you dreams and heavy REM sleep.
All right. I mean, again, you can get into alternate mental states without drugs, like when you dream. And again, we've already agreed that that stuff isn't necessarily accurate.
I guess it's based on how you want to take it, because if you're the type that's so big into science, like that everything is simple. Like people that like nature more.
Science is hard work.
Will be more attracted to psychedelics.
Yeah, but I mean, saying I had a magical experience in my brain and I believe it is about the simplest point of view you could come to. I mean, there's no attempt to analyze it. There's no attempt to break down what it actually means. It's just gullibility in a way.
Well, what do you think happens when you take a psychedelic?
Chemical stuff in your brain.
It interferes with your brain chemistry, and your brain behaves differently, and you might ascribe meaning to that isn't anywhere except in your brain. So that's kind of the nature of my questions: is what outside of your brain can we learn from this, right?
That we're basically all the same. It takes away your ego.
Okay.
So there's a perspective change, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think you can get a perspective change like that from a lot of different things, and
but this is like profound, and it happens instantly.
Okay.
All right. Well, when you think of something significant you've learned, I think you should call back. And we're going to move on. We've got like 8 minutes left in the show, so we're going to talk to Matthew, Las Vegas.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. First time on the show.
Great.
I'm a
Welcome.
little nervous, but
Don't be.
It's okay.
I
Take some drugs. It'll calm you
atheist
down.
for like 6 months, and I've been talking to my Christian friends and stuff about morality. So I thought today was a good day to call in.
Good.
It is, yeah.
And one of the things they always tell me when I bring up all these horrible things, because I'm starting to read the Bible and I'm like, holy crap. And they tell me like, oh, well, you can ignore that. Like I just get this from it. I take this, I take that. And at that point, I feel like there is no point then in cracking it open and reading it, because you aren't learning anything.
Right.
You're just agreeing with some part.
You're projecting your own self onto it. Right.
Right.
So
I mean,
so why do you need it? Right. Exactly.
Exactly.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of wanted to hear what you guys had to say about that.
Oh, we're with you. This sort of thing that happens all the time.
I mean, it's certainly convenient that everybody who believes there's an omniscient diviner of morality always seems to think that that thing agrees with them in every detail.
Right.
There's actually a scientific article on this sort of idea that your perception of God and what he thinks and what he desires is more similar to your own things, your own desires and perceptions, than if I were to say, well, Russell, would he would say this or this sort of things. But people are accurate when they think of their friends and what they would say. But then when they project about God, they're actually projecting themselves onto it, and this has actually been measured in a scientific paper. So God is in your brain. God is, maybe God is tryptophan or whatever that drug was.
Right. That's the stuff in Turkey that gets you sleepy.
I like Batman so it's real. 'Cause he made me good. All right, yeah, I guess that's it. But
right.
Okay.
I said thanks again. You guys are a big part of the reason why I realized that I'm an atheist and not just an agnostic.
Well, thank
Good
you
for
very
you.
much.
Awesome.
That's a nice thing to say.
Very good.
All right, have a great day.
Take care.
Bye. Daniel
drug?
in New York. What?
Hello.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi. I'm a first-time caller. I wanted to say that I'm a huge fan. I enjoy the show.
Thank you.
About every episode, every week. So the reason I'm calling is because I'm an atheist, by the way. So I'm calling because when arguing with theists, whether it be in person or on the internet, on Facebook, one of the annoying problems that I always encounter is, believing, some scientific study as opposed to the Bible. They assume that every position is a faith-based position, and then, go into, saying, oh, well, you weren't there to see, this study about how, fish color changes in a pond where there are predators or where there aren't. Things like that. They assume that you're
even safe to believe that.
Ah, okay.
It's annoying. 'Cause
So it's a bit of a mind game. They're saying, well, science isn't objective because somebody just wrote this paper down and nobody can tell, right? Well,
as if it's a huge conspiracy, you know.
well, one of the cornerstones of science is that it's sort of reproducible, right? That scientists tend to be open with their results, and it's an integral part of the scientific process for there to be criticism, for people to try to replicate these things, for people to poke holes in it, and at the end of the day, we learn a little bit more about truth, the nature of truth, right? And we have tentative assessments of what's out there. We don't know everything. We're learning as we go and these sorts of things. And I think that the people that are saying these sorts of things are really just kind of they don't understand science, and they're just trying to spin you around in circles, it's kind of a sad thing, right?
Well,
if you have to play mind games to advance your side, then you don't have very much, do you?
Even more than that, it's not just denying science; it's denying how we deal with things on a day-to-day basis. Because in general, everybody's got a certain amount of natural skepticism about whether something actually happened or not. I mean, if I just came up to you and I said, "Hey, last week I died, but I was raised from the dead 3 days later, and here I am talking to you," I think even the most hardcore Christian, maybe especially the most hardcore Christian, would look at me funny and say, why would I believe that? What Christians are generally doing in giving their religion special status is to give a pass to the particular wild claims that they want to believe. And sometimes I find that the way to approach that question is to ask sort of leading questions just like that, like blatantly lie about stuff that's obviously not true, and ask, if I get called out on it, how do you know that's not true? Because science is just sort of a codifying of the way we approach reality already. I mean, we generally have pretty good bullshit detectors. We don't take stuff people say to us at face value, and if we do, we can get in big trouble, like getting scammed by a con artist, believing maybe that a small vial of snake oil is the cure for cancer or something.
Right.
And I don't know, you might want to read like the Encyclopedia of Philosophy's discussion of evidence, but really the main issue is that do you have standards for believing whether something is true or isn't true? And a lot of times what these conversations are trying to get at is that even though casually people act like they have standards, they want to throw them out when it comes to their magical beliefs. Oh shoot, we're out of time.
But keep plugging at it. Keep up the good fight. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, and you too.
All right. That's our show. We'll see you next week, and we'll see you at El Arroyo, I guess. And thank you to all the great crew. If you're still on the line, then you can hang on a little, and we might pick you up after the show for a few minutes. And see you next week. And thanks, Don.